Hello, dear literature enthusiasts and fellow cinephiles. I'm genuinely thrilled to sit down with you today and wander together through the intricate, sometimes whimsical, often surprising landscape of a film that has been lingering in my mind for days. Freakier Friday 2025. Before we delve into the heart of its narrative, I want to extend a heartfelt invitation. If you enjoy these explorations, the kind where we peel back layers and examine the alchemy of storytelling, please consider liking this video and subscribing. This space is meant to celebrate the way stories can teach, challenge, and resonate, and your engagement keeps this dialogue alive. I also want to emphasize something at the outset. What we're about to do is not a conventional movie review. Rather, it's a deeply intellectual, theoretical, and critical examination designed primarily for those with a love of literature and a desire to dissect cinematic storytelling in a meaningful, reflective way. It's a conversation more than a critique, a journey into ideas, themes, and human experience, rather than a tally of box office earnings or star ratings. Sitting down to watch this film, I was struck almost immediately by its audacity. Not just the premise, which is admittedly fantastically bizarre, but the layers of human psychology, familial complexity, and social observation embedded beneath its comedic surface. There's something about this film that resonated with me personally, recalling moments from my own adolescence and early adulthood where I felt caught between identities, expectations, and the relentless pace of life. The story's exploration of perspective, of walking in someone else's shoes, literally in this case, stirred memories of empathy learned the hard way, of misunderstandings corrected only through lived experience. The film's premise, while playful, is deceptively profound. It revolves around two characters, mother and daughter, though I won't spoil their nuanced dynamics here, who, through a fantastical twist of fate, swap lives in ways that illuminate both the comedic and painful complexities of identity, responsibility, and self-perception. From the opening scenes, we are anchored in realism. The daughter's struggles with social pressures, the mother's juggling of professional and personal expectations, the subtle microaggressions, miscommunications, and everyday frustrations that make their world relatable. And then, just when the viewer is comfortably settled in that recognizable reality, the narrative flips, ushering us into a series of increasingly bizarre, yet emotionally resonant experiences. The beauty of this film lies in its tonal dexterity. It moves seamlessly from humor to heartfelt reflection without ever feeling disjointed. There are moments of slapstick absurdity, body swap hijinks, mistaken identities, chaotic encounters, that elicit genuine laughter, and yet these moments are never empty. Each comedic beat carries an undercurrent of insight, a reflection on how we perceive ourselves and how the world perceives us. In watching these sequences, I found myself laughing while simultaneously reflecting on my own assumptions about behavior, competence, and identity. The narrative encourages empathy, not by preaching, but by placing us directly in the lived experience of another person, and in doing so, it opens space for both humor and introspection to coexist. The visual storytelling is a crucial part of this alchemy. Early scenes establish a contrast between the mother's meticulously organized life and the daughter's chaotic, restless environment. Cinematography here works almost as a silent narrator. Camera angles, color palettes, and spatial composition subtly communicate tension, aspiration, and the clash of worlds. Warm, structured lighting defines the mother's world, emphasizing routine and predictability, while the daughter's spaces are saturated with movement, clutter, and the kinetic energy of youth. When the body swap occurs, the visuals immediately adapt, and we are invited to see the same spaces through the lens of a different consciousness. I found myself marveling at how much emotion the camera could convey without dialogue, how the framing and pacing made me feel the dissonance the characters themselves are experiencing. The plot itself is a fascinating interplay of cause and consequence. The mother and daughter, initially struggling to navigate each other's lives, face escalating challenges that force them to confront uncomfortable truths. The daughter experiences the full weight of adult responsibilities, from professional pressures to social obligations and ethical dilemmas that previously seemed invisible. The mother, in turn, confronts the emotional turbulence and social labyrinth of adolescence, friendships, peer pressure, and the quest for autonomy. The narrative teases out the humor, tension, and poignancy of these experiences in a way that feels both organic and meticulously crafted. It's as if the story were designed to teach empathy through lived experience, illustrating how perspective shifts can illuminate the unseen struggles of others. Key plot developments are handled with a remarkable sense of pacing. Early incidents are playful and almost farcical. A spilled coffee, a misinterpreted text, a wardrobe malfunction, but each moment escalates stakes and builds narrative momentum. By the midpoint, we are firmly invested in the character's growth. The comedy is inseparable from the emotional truths being revealed. I recall one particularly resonant sequence in which the daughter, inhabiting her mother's role, must make a high-stakes decision at work. The tension is intercut with scenes of the mother navigating high school drama, and the editing brilliantly juxtaposes the pressures of adulthood and adolescence. Watching this unfold, I was struck by how universal the emotional beats are. Regardless of age or circumstance, we are all negotiating expectations, testing our limits, and learning from our mistakes. There are also subtler narrative layers that reward close attention. Recurring motifs, mirrors, clocks, and specific household objects serve as visual anchors, reminders of continuity and the passage of time. These motifs become particularly meaningful as the characters' experiences converge, symbolizing the interconnectedness of personal growth and relational understanding. A mirror is not merely a reflective surface. It becomes a metaphor for self-examination. A clock is not simply a tool for marking time. It underscores urgency, responsibility, and the inevitability of consequences. These narrative choices reveal the filmmaker's literary sensibility, their understanding that cinema, at its best, can operate as both visual spectacle and philosophical inquiry. The supporting characters also contribute to the film's thematic depth. Friends, colleagues, and extended family members are not mere comic foils. They act as catalysts for reflection, growth, and revelation. Interactions that initially seem trivial, an offhand comment, a forgotten obligation, a casual misunderstanding, gain weight as the narrative progresses. I was fascinated by how these peripheral characters illuminate aspects of the protagonist's personalities that might otherwise remain hidden. Observing the daughter's peers react to her suddenly heightened maturity, or seeing colleagues misinterpret the mother's adolescent-inhabited behavior, creates a rich tapestry of relational dynamics that mirrors real life in both absurdity and complexity. A particularly striking aspect of the film is how it handles emotional resonance without ever lapsing into sentimentality. The filmmakers are adept at balancing comedy and pathos. One scene that I remember vividly involves a quiet moment of reflection. The mother, inhabiting her daughter's body, sitting alone in a dimly lit bedroom, contemplating her own childhood choices and regrets. The camera lingers just long enough to let us inhabit her interior world, and the emotional truth lands with a weight that is both subtle and profound. The humor, which dominates other moments, is never far away, but it is tempered by empathy and recognition of human vulnerability. It's a balance that feels rare in mainstream cinema, and it deeply resonated with my own reflections on family, identity, and the passage of time. In terms of narrative structure, the film's clever use of cause and effect sequences enhances both engagement and thematic richness. Early missteps echo later consequences, and minor incidents, forgotten chores, misinterpreted text messages, flubbed social cues, resonate throughout the plot, creating a sense of cohesion and inevitability. Yet these moments are never mechanical. They emerge naturally from character choices and personality traits, which grounds even the most fantastical aspects of the story. I found myself contemplating how our own small, seemingly inconsequential actions ripple outward, influencing outcomes in ways we might never anticipate. There is also a deft exploration of power dynamics woven into the narrative. By swapping lives, the protagonists experience firsthand how power, whether social, familial, or professional, can shape perception, agency, and behavior. The daughter navigates environments where her lack of authority is keenly felt, while the mother confronts the often unseen pressures of adolescence. This inversion is not only comedic but intellectually provocative. It challenges assumptions about competence, responsibility, and the distribution of social power. Watching these experiences unfold, I was reminded of my own moments of displacement, moments where stepping outside oneself, or stepping into someone else's shoes, clarified truths about privilege, empathy, and the complexity of social hierarchies. One of the most compelling narrative techniques is how suspense is integrated into everyday life. Unlike conventional thrillers or high-concept dramas, the film builds tension through relatability. A missed appointment, an overheard conversation, a mismanaged relationship. These seemingly mundane occurrences carry emotional stakes precisely because they are so recognizable. Humor punctuates these moments, creating a rhythm that is both engaging and reflective. As a viewer, I was continuously aware that the laughter was intertwined with insight, that every comic twist illuminated an emotional or ethical truth. The resolution of the story is equally satisfying, not because it resolves all conflict in a tidy manner, but because it rewards insight, growth, and empathy. The characters' journeys converge with subtle, thoughtful symmetry. Lessons are internalized, misunderstandings clarified, and relationships strengthened. Importantly, the narrative leaves space for reflection beyond the credits, inviting the audience to ponder how identity, perspective, and human connection shape our own experiences. I remember leaving the screening with a quiet sense of wonder, thinking not just about the clever plot mechanics, but about how the story had mirrored, challenged, and expanded my own understanding of family, responsibility, and selfhood. In teasing the major twists, I will only hint. The narrative contains reversals, revelations, and discoveries that shift not only what we know about the characters, but also how we perceive their internal worlds. The humor often masks profound insights, and the fantastical premise serves as a lens for examining everyday truths. The plot surprises, yes, but more importantly, it encourages reflection on empathy, adaptability, and the consequences of choice. Each twist is layered, designed to reward careful observation and contemplation rather than shock for shock's sake. Ultimately, what makes this film resonate for me is its intelligence, empathy, and the care with which it handles human experience. It is at once a comedy, a coming-of-age story, a family drama, and a philosophical meditation on identity, perspective, and connection. The filmmakers trust the audience to engage, to reflect, to laugh, and to feel in equal measure. The narrative doesn't lecture. It invites participation, much like a favorite piece of literature might. Watching this film, I was reminded of the delicate balance between humor and insight, between spectacle and subtlety. The body swap premise could have easily become a shallow exercise in slapstick, yet the filmmakers imbue it with emotional depth, thematic resonance, and literary sophistication. Every scene, every line, every visual choice contributes to a holistic experience that lingers, prompting reflection long after the credits roll. I found myself thinking about relationships in my own life, about the moments when understanding someone else's perspective transformed how I engaged with the world. That, to me, is the magic of this film. It entertains while fostering insight, it delights while it teaches, it makes us laugh while inviting us to think deeply about who we are and how we relate to others. As we prepare to dive deeper into analysis in future discussions, I want to leave you with this. Freakier Friday 2025 is a film that rewards curiosity, attention, and empathy. It is a work that bridges humor and intellect, playfulness and reflection, narrative and thematic exploration. Watching it is not merely an exercise in entertainment. It is an invitation to think critically, feel authentically, and explore the labyrinthine connections between identity, experience, and perception. It reminded me, in ways both subtle and profound, of the power of storytelling to illuminate not just fantastical worlds, but the truths of our own lives. From the very opening scene, the film establishes a rhythm that is both familiar and disorienting, drawing us into the intertwined lives of its central characters before the fantastical element even emerges. We meet the daughter, whose name I will withhold to allow for the full experience of discovery, in the middle of a typically chaotic morning. The camera lingers on small, intimate details. A backpack slung haphazardly over one shoulder, textbooks spilling onto the floor, a half-eaten breakfast abandoned in favor of scrolling through a phone. These moments, though ordinary, are crafted to evoke empathy and recognition. I found myself recalling mornings of my own adolescence, when the world seemed simultaneously full of possibility and weighted with invisible obligations. It's a masterful way to ground the audience in reality before introducing the extraordinary. Parallel to this, we are introduced to the mother, whose life seems, at first glance, orderly and precise. Her morning is a study in efficiency, a carefully curated wardrobe, a meticulously arranged breakfast, and a calendar that organizes not just her work, but every familial obligation. Yet beneath this veneer of control, there is a subtle undercurrent of tension and fatigue. The film excels at capturing this duality. How competence can coexist with quiet frustration, how apparent control often masks anxiety and the yearning for understanding. Watching these scenes, I was struck by how the filmmakers used ordinary domestic spaces to convey inner life. A neatly made bed or a polished kitchen counter becomes a stage for exploring emotional containment and the pressures of responsibility. Early narrative sequences hint at friction without overstating it. The daughter and mother, though connected by familial bonds, exist in adjacent worlds, speaking past each other rather than truly listening. Dialogue is clipped, often humorous in its misunderstandings, yet layered with authenticity. A fleeting comment about school pressures, a sigh at a spilled coffee, a subtle glance of exasperation. These moments accumulate, establishing the stakes and emotional landscape that the impending fantastical event will illuminate. I recall thinking as I watched how much of family life is negotiation, compromise, and silent endurance, and how artfully this film captures that without resorting to caricature. The inciting incident, the moment when their lives begin to intersect in the extraordinary, is both whimsical and carefully foreshadowed. Early hints, almost imperceptible, suggest that the film will bend reality. A fleeting reflection in a mirror seems to shimmer unusually, a clock ticks backward for a fraction of a second, and a curious artifact appears briefly in the background of the mother's workspace. These subtle cues establish the film's literary sophistication, preparing the attentive viewer for the fantastical while maintaining an air of realism. When the body swap occurs, it is both shocking and entirely believable within the story's internal logic. The execution is cinematic brilliance. Quick cuts, close-ups on startled expressions, and a swell of music that conveys both chaos and wonder. I remember leaning forward in my seat, feeling a rush of the same disorientation the characters themselves are experiencing. Once the swap has occurred, the narrative pivots into a series of sequences that blend comedy, empathy, and character exploration. The daughter, suddenly inhabiting her mother's body, is immediately confronted with responsibilities she has only observed from the periphery. Professional obligations, social expectations, and complex interpersonal dynamics that previously seemed distant or irrelevant. Watching her navigate these challenges, I was reminded of the transformative power of lived experience. How stepping into another's role can illuminate not only their struggles, but our own assumptions. The film does not present this as a moral lesson. It presents it as lived reality, often messy, sometimes absurd, but always instructive. One early sequence that stands out involves the daughter attempting to manage a work meeting in her mother's stead. The juxtaposition of her adolescent habits against adult expectations creates a comedic rhythm. Yet beneath the humor lies a sharp commentary on perception and competence. Small errors, a mispronounced term, a misunderstood protocol, reveal how finely tuned social structures are and how easily they can be disrupted. I found myself laughing not only at the antics, but also at the film's subtle critique of the adult world. The unspoken rules, the performative aspects of professionalism, and the silent judgments that shape every interaction. Meanwhile, the mother inhabiting her daughter's life faces an entirely different kind of challenge: social navigation, peer pressure, and the emotional volatility of adolescence. Scenes of high school corridors, group projects, and casual conflicts are imbued with a heightened sense of observation. The mother's perspective transforms familiar teenage experiences into complex moral and emotional exercises. Watching her negotiate friendships, misunderstandings, and social hierarchies, I was struck by how effectively the film portrays the universal awkwardness and learning curves inherent in adolescence. The humor is often physical or situational, but the emotional insight is profound. The film's first half also introduces secondary characters who are far from incidental. Teachers, friends, colleagues, and extended family members serve as mirrors and foils, reflecting aspects of the protagonist's personalities and catalyzing growth. One memorable scene involves the daughter, in her mother's body, attempting to navigate a particularly sensitive workplace discussion. A colleague's offhand comment reveals biases the daughter had not previously perceived, prompting both embarrassment and reflection. Similarly, the mother, in her daughter's form, encounters subtle social pressures among peers that illuminate the unacknowledged weight of adolescence. These interactions are crafted with attention to detail and emotional authenticity, and I found myself thinking about how much of life consists of negotiating relational subtleties we rarely acknowledge. Humor remains a constant thread, yet it is never shallow. The film cleverly integrates situational comedy with character-driven insight. A spilled drink, a misread text, a wardrobe mishap. These moments are laugh-out-loud funny, but they are grounded in the realities of identity and perspective. What makes the comedy resonate is that it emerges from character choices and relational dynamics, rather than random absurdity. I was reminded of the ways in which our own missteps, misunderstandings, and awkward moments often carry deeper truths about self-perception, social navigation, and personal growth. Conflict escalates naturally as the first half progresses. Early misadventures give way to more significant challenges. Missed obligations, misunderstandings, and escalating stakes that test both the daughter's and mother's adaptability. The film balances tension and humor with remarkable skill. I recall a sequence in which the daughter, now in a professional role, must make a high-stakes decision without guidance, while the mother, navigating a peer-driven social environment, confronts the ethical dilemmas of friendship and loyalty. The cross-cutting between these sequences is seamless, heightening suspense while reinforcing thematic resonance. Each challenge is an opportunity for growth, reflection, and, occasionally, comic relief. Symbolism begins to emerge subtly, enriching the narrative beyond surface humor. Mirrors, clocks, and recurring household objects serve as visual anchors, signaling continuity and the passage of time. Mirrors, in particular, underscore self-reflection. The characters' expressions in unfamiliar bodies reveal both vulnerability and insight. Objects that initially appear inconsequential, a locket, a notebook, a framed photograph, gain significance as touchstones of memory, empathy, and relational connection. I was fascinated by how these small details contributed to the narrative's depth, transforming ordinary objects into vessels of meaning and emotional resonance. A noteworthy aspect of this section of the film is how it handles pacing. The first half moves briskly enough to maintain engagement, yet it allows for reflective pauses that give emotional beats room to resonate. Close-ups on subtle gestures, an anxious hand, a fleeting smile, hesitated glance, communicate volumes about internal state. I found myself attuned to these micro-expressions, noting how much information and emotional nuance the film conveys without dialogue. It's a masterclass in cinematic storytelling, demonstrating how careful observation can deepen our understanding of character and theme. The interplay between order and chaos is also prominent. The daughter's attempts to manage her mother's responsibilities are frequently disrupted by unexpected developments. A missed appointment, a surprising social encounter, or a miscommunication that cascades into a minor crisis. Similarly, the mother's navigation of teenage life is punctuated by unanticipated social dynamics that challenge her assumptions and compel adaptability. These narrative choices emphasize the film's exploration of resilience, flexibility, and the unpredictable nature of experience. I found myself reflecting on the ways in which our own lives are shaped by contingencies, by moments of disruption that reveal character and demand ingenuity. In addition to character-driven tension, the first half introduces broader thematic questions. Identity, empathy, and moral responsibility are woven into every scene. The body swap premise allows for exploration of perspective in ways that feel both imaginative and deeply human. Watching the mother inhabit adolescent experiences highlights the often unacknowledged pressures of growing up, while the daughter's immersion in adult life underscores the weight of responsibility and societal expectation. I was struck by how these parallel journeys illuminate universal truths, that understanding others requires not only observation but experience, and that growth is inseparable from challenge and reflection. Friendship and relational dynamics are further explored through subplots that develop organically. The daughter's interactions with peers reveal the nuanced codes of adolescent social life: loyalty, gossip, hierarchy, and vulnerability. The mother, in contrast, must navigate professional and social obligations with delicacy and awareness. These parallel arcs converge metaphorically, reinforcing the narrative's central concern with perspective and relational intelligence. Humor, tension, and emotional insight are seamlessly interwoven, creating a rhythm that keeps the audience engaged while allowing thematic resonance to unfold. I would be remiss not to highlight the cinematography and visual storytelling that enhance the first half's impact. Shifts in color palette, lighting, and camera perspective mirror the protagonist's experiences. The daughter, inhabiting her mother's world, is often framed within structured, controlled compositions, emphasizing the constraints she now faces. Conversely, the mother, navigating her daughter's domain, is often filmed with kinetic camera movement, reflecting the instability and fluidity of adolescence. These visual cues are never arbitrary. They are integral to the narrative, reinforcing character experience and thematic depth. The first half also teases the story's larger mysteries and stakes. Subtle foreshadowing hints at consequences that will reverberate beyond the immediate narrative. Small mistakes, overlooked details, and interpersonal missteps accumulate into a sense of impending revelation. The film encourages attentiveness, rewarding viewers who notice recurring motifs, thematic echoes, and narrative parallels. I found this intellectually stimulating as it aligns with the film's broader goal of exploring perspective, consequence, and relational complexity. By the midpoint, the characters have experienced a series of escalating challenges that test their adaptability, empathy, and insight. The daughter begins to understand the emotional labor and moral complexity of adult life, while the mother gains first-hand knowledge of adolescent social dynamics, ethical dilemmas, and the vulnerability inherent in youth. Each challenge is both humorous and illuminating, blending situational comedy with psychological and emotional realism. I was struck by the film's ability to navigate these dualities without ever diminishing either the comedy or the depth. The first half concludes with a heightened sense of anticipation and reflection. Key relationships have been tested, misunderstandings have escalated, and both protagonists are poised on the cusp of deeper insight and transformation. The narrative tension is carefully balanced. We are eager to see how these challenges will be resolved, yet we are also invited to reflect on the moral and emotional lessons embedded in the journey so far. I remember feeling a mixture of amusement, empathy, and intellectual engagement, marveling at how the film simultaneously entertains, provokes, and resonates on multiple levels. Throughout this section, the film excels in its integration of humor, empathy, and thematic exploration. Every comedic beat carries emotional or ethical significance. Every relational interaction deepens character understanding, and every visual or auditory detail contributes to narrative cohesion. I found myself repeatedly noting how carefully crafted each sequence is. The timing of a joke, the placement of a camera, the pacing of dialogue, all work in concert to create a rich, immersive experience. It's a reminder of cinema's potential to combine intellect, emotion, and artistry into a single resonant work. By the time the first half draws to a close, the audience has been thoroughly immersed in the dual perspectives of mother and daughter. Their experiences, challenges, and insights set the stage for the unfolding narrative. The second half promises resolution, revelation, and the culmination of both personal and relational growth. Yet even without witnessing the conclusion, the first half alone offers a profound exploration of identity, empathy, responsibility, and the humor inherent in human experience. The film's genius lies in its ability to balance these elements, creating a story that is simultaneously entertaining, intellectually engaging, and emotionally resonant. As the story continues to unfold, the consequences of the body swap begin to intensify, revealing not only the comedic potential of the premise, but also its profound emotional and psychological stakes. By this stage, both the daughter and mother have experienced enough of each other's worlds to understand the fundamental challenges and pressures inherent in their lives, yet they are still navigating these new realities with a mixture of awe, confusion, and occasionally outright panic. I remember being struck by how the filmmakers maintain a delicate balance here. The humor remains lively and accessible, yet every situation carries a weight that deepens the viewer's understanding of identity, responsibility, and empathy. The daughter, inhabiting her mother's body, encounters a series of professional and social challenges that escalate quickly. One particularly tense sequence involves her attending a high-stakes meeting with senior colleagues who are unaware of the unusual circumstances. The daughter's inexperience in the adult professional world becomes immediately apparent. She misinterprets technical jargon, hesitates at crucial decision points, and inadvertently disrupts the flow of discussion. Yet it is precisely in these moments of vulnerability that her character shines. Despite her inexperience, she demonstrates resourcefulness, intuition, and a willingness to engage ethically with the problems at hand. Watching this unfold, I reflected on my own early experiences navigating professional responsibilities, recalling the mixture of anxiety, determination, and occasional improvisation that accompanies unfamiliar challenges. Meanwhile, the mother, navigating her daughter's social sphere, confronts the emotional complexities of adolescence more directly. Friendships, rivalries, and the nuances of peer communication become arenas for both humor and insight. One particularly compelling scene shows the mother negotiating a delicate situation between her daughter's friends, where a seemingly minor misunderstanding has the potential to escalate into conflict. The mother's adult perspective allows her to mediate effectively, yet her lack of familiarity with teenage social norms introduces awkwardness and comedic tension. This sequence brilliantly highlights the differences in perspective and experience between youth and adulthood, reinforcing one of the story's central themes. Empathy is learned through lived experience. As these parallel arcs progress, the film begins to layer additional complexity through unexpected plot twists and reveals. A subplot involving a hidden family secret emerges, providing both narrative suspense and emotional resonance. Without revealing too much, it becomes clear that the experiences of the mother and daughter are intertwined with unresolved histories, past misunderstandings, and unspoken emotions. These elements serve to deepen the stakes and create a sense of inevitability, as though the fantastical body swap has opened a window into truths that could not otherwise be confronted. I found myself reflecting on how often our own perspectives are limited by what we do not know about others, and how empathy often requires uncovering hidden dimensions of experience. The narrative also introduces moments of heightened tension and near catastrophe, which serve to test the protagonist's adaptability and moral compass. The daughter, confronted with an urgent professional decision that could impact numerous lives, must navigate ethical dilemmas with minimal guidance. Each choice carries weight, and the consequences of error are amplified by her limited understanding of the adult world. These sequences are intercut with scenes of the mother negotiating high-stakes social and emotional scenarios among her peers, creating a rhythm of suspense and reflection. The parallelism is striking. Both characters are learning, adapting, and ultimately growing, yet their experiences are shaped by the constraints and expectations of their respective roles. Comedy continues to serve as a vehicle for insight throughout this portion of the story. Physical humor, misunderstandings, and situational irony abound, yet these moments are always grounded in character and relational dynamics. A particularly memorable instance involves the daughter attempting to manage her mother's schedule while simultaneously dealing with a minor professional crisis. A miscommunication leads to a cascade of increasingly absurd situations. The humor is immediate and visceral, eliciting laughter, yet it also illuminates deeper truths about the challenges of responsibility, the fragility of perception, and the unpredictable consequences of seemingly minor actions. I found myself marveling at the skill with which the filmmakers integrated laughter and reflection, ensuring that neither was diminished by the other. As the narrative progresses, the film skillfully escalates both stakes and emotional resonance through a series of interconnected sequences. The daughter encounters a professional rival whose motivations are ambiguous, creating tension and prompting strategic thinking. The mother, meanwhile, discovers a peer-driven conflict among her daughter's friends that mirrors unresolved tensions from her own youth. These parallel arcs converge thematically. Both characters are confronted with the necessity of understanding, negotiation, and ethical decision-making. The film demonstrates how personal growth is inseparable from the challenges posed by social and professional dynamics, and I found myself reflecting on moments in my own life where perspective shifts led to profound learning. A particularly striking aspect of the story's second half is the use of visual storytelling to reinforce character experience and thematic depth. The daughter's experiences in her mother's world are often framed with structured compositions and controlled lighting, emphasizing the constraints and expectations she now faces. Conversely, the mother's experiences in her daughter's social environment are shot with dynamic camera movement and vibrant, sometimes chaotic, color schemes, reflecting the emotional volatility and unpredictability of adolescence. These visual cues are seamlessly integrated with narrative and character development, enhancing both immersion and understanding. I was fascinated by how much emotion and insight could be conveyed through cinematography alone, without reliance on dialogue or exposition. Key relational dynamics reach pivotal moments in this portion of the film. The mother and daughter, though inhabiting each other's bodies, begin to anticipate the perspectives and needs of the other more intuitively. Moments of empathy emerge organically, often accompanied by humor or surprise. A scene in which the daughter, understanding the pressures her mother faces, takes decisive action to prevent a professional mishap is particularly resonant. Similarly, the mother's intervention in a social conflict among peers demonstrates both strategic thinking and emotional intelligence. These moments highlight the central narrative theme. Understanding another person's experience is transformative, not only for the individual but for their relationships. The plot's twists are carefully calibrated to maintain tension and engagement. An unexpected complication arises in the form of a misunderstanding that threatens to expose the body swap, introducing suspense and raising the stakes for both characters. The narrative cleverly balances the need for resolution with ongoing challenges, ensuring that each scene carries both narrative momentum and thematic significance. I recall feeling a heightened sense of anticipation, eager to see how each twist would be navigated while simultaneously reflecting on the broader questions of identity, responsibility, and relational complexity. Emotional resonance reaches new heights as the story delves into moments of personal reflection and vulnerability. The daughter, facing the cumulative weight of adult responsibilities, experiences a profound moment of introspection. Her frustrations, anxieties, and ethical considerations coalesce into a deeper understanding of her mother's life. Conversely, the mother, confronting the social pressures and emotional turbulence of adolescence, gains insight into the vulnerabilities, aspirations, and resilience of her daughter. These sequences are quietly powerful, blending subtle visual cues, reflective dialogue, and carefully orchestrated pacing to create moments of genuine empathy and understanding. Watching these scenes, I found myself contemplating my own relationships and the ways in which perspective and experience shape empathy. Secondary plotlines also reach critical junctures. Friends, colleagues, and extended family members act as both obstacles and facilitators, their interactions highlighting character growth and thematic resonance. A scene involving a peer confrontation provides a nuanced exploration of loyalty, trust, and communication, while a workplace scenario underscores the interplay between competence, perception, and ethical decision-making. These subplots are skillfully interwoven with the central narrative, creating a rich tapestry of relational dynamics and narrative complexity. I found the balance of humor, suspense, and insight particularly compelling, as it reflects the multidimensionality of real-life experience. One of the film's most effective narrative strategies is the use of juxtaposition to highlight growth and insight. Parallel sequences of mother and daughter navigating respective challenges are intercut in ways that emphasize both similarity and contrast. The daughter's growing competence and adaptability in the adult world mirror the mother's increasing emotional intelligence and social acumen in adolescent spaces. These sequences underscore the narrative's central concern with perspective, empathy, and relational understanding. I was particularly impressed by how these interwoven sequences create a sense of cohesion and thematic richness, enhancing both engagement and reflection. Conflict, both internal and external, escalates as the narrative approaches its climax. Ethical dilemmas, social misunderstandings, and professional pressures converge, demanding decisive action from both protagonists. The daughter faces a scenario where her choices carry tangible consequences for others, testing her judgment, moral compass, and ability to navigate ambiguity. The mother encounters parallel challenges among her peers, where interpersonal missteps could escalate into lasting relational consequences. These converging pressures heighten suspense and emphasize the stakes inherent in understanding and responsibility. Watching these sequences, I felt a palpable tension, immersed in both the humor and the gravity of the unfolding events. The film's humor remains a vital component, even as tension mounts. Physical comedy, situational irony, and witty dialogue continue to elicit laughter, yet the comedy is never divorced from character or theme. A mismanaged social encounter, a professional faux pas, or a brief misunderstanding all serve dual purposes, entertaining the audience while reinforcing the narrative's insights into perspective, empathy, and growth. I found the seamless blending of comedy and introspection particularly compelling, as it reflects the complexity of real-life experiences where humor and challenge often coexist. Symbolism becomes more pronounced as the story nears resolution. Objects, spaces, and visual motifs carry layered meaning. Mirrors reflect self-awareness and growth, clocks signify urgency and consequence, and recurring household items underscore relational continuity and memory. These elements enrich the narrative without overshadowing character-driven storytelling. I was struck by how carefully the filmmakers integrated these symbolic cues, creating a visual language that complements dialogue, action, and thematic exploration. As the narrative reaches its climax, key misunderstandings and challenges are resolved in ways that feel both surprising and inevitable. The daughter successfully navigates a professional dilemma, applying insight gained through lived experience in her mother's world. The mother resolves a social conflict, demonstrating empathy, strategy, and adaptability learned through inhabiting her daughter's life. These resolutions are satisfying not because they are simple or neat, but because they reflect authentic growth, learning, and relational understanding. I was particularly impressed by the balance between narrative closure and the recognition that life, in its complexity, rarely resolves perfectly. The final sequences bring the protagonists together, not simply to reverse the body swap, but to integrate the insights, empathy, and personal growth they have gained. A series of reflective, emotionally resonant moments underscores the thematic core. Understanding another person's perspective fosters connection, growth, and mutual respect. Humor punctuates these moments, ensuring that the narrative maintains its lightness even as it delivers profound insight. Watching this, I felt both satisfaction and contemplation, appreciating how the film manages to entertain, provoke, and resonate simultaneously. In the closing scenes, relationships are recalibrated with newfound understanding. Small gestures, shared glances, and quiet acknowledgments communicate the depth of growth achieved by both characters. The daughter and mother are no longer simply existing in parallel worlds. They have internalized lessons about empathy, responsibility, and perspective that will shape their ongoing interactions. The narrative concludes with a sense of equilibrium, yet it leaves the audience with space for reflection, inviting consideration of how perspective, experience, and relational insight can transform our own lives. The film's final visual and auditory choices reinforce thematic resonance. Lighting, color, and framing emphasize emotional closure and growth, while the musical score underscores both humor and reflection. These choices are not merely decorative. They deepen immersion and enhance the narrative's emotional impact. I found myself lingering on these details, appreciating how every element of the film, from dialogue to cinematography to sound design, works in concert to create a coherent, meaningful, and memorable experience. Ultimately, the second half of the film solidifies its status as a work of intelligence, empathy, and emotional resonance. The protagonist's journeys, full of humor, challenge, and discovery, culminate in insight, growth, and relational reconnection. The narrative rewards attentiveness, reflection, and engagement, demonstrating the transformative potential of perspective and experience. I left the viewing experience with a sense of both delight and contemplation, recognizing that the story's fantastical premise serves as a vehicle for profound truths about identity, empathy, and human connection. The genius of the story lies not only in its resolution, but in the journey itself. Every twist, challenge, and revelation reinforces the central themes, ensuring that humor, reflection, and emotional resonance remain intertwined. Watching the characters navigate each other's worlds, confront ethical dilemmas, and achieve understanding provides a lens through which the audience can reflect on their own experiences, relationships, and assumptions. I was particularly struck by how the narrative manages to remain playful, insightful, and emotionally engaging simultaneously, a rare accomplishment in contemporary cinema. By the end of this portion, the audience is left with a clear sense of the protagonist's growth, the narrative's thematic depth, and the rich interplay of humor, suspense, and reflection. The second half of the story rewards engagement, insight, and empathy, leaving viewers both entertained and intellectually stimulated. It is a testament to the filmmaker's skill that a story built around a fantastical premise can feel so grounded, so emotionally truthful, and so resonant with the universal challenges of perspective, identity, and relational understanding. From the moment we are introduced to the daughter, her character radiates a blend of adolescent exuberance and underlying insecurity that immediately invites empathy. She is both vividly alive and remarkably introspective, the type of character whose internal world feels as expansive as her external circumstances. Early scenes establish her daily rhythm, navigating school, managing friendships, negotiating parental expectations, and confronting the subtle anxieties of adolescence. Her humor is spontaneous and often self-deprecating, but beneath the laughter lies a vulnerability that resonates deeply. Watching her navigate small crises, spilled coffee, a forgotten homework assignment, a misread text, evoked memories of my own adolescent missteps and triumphs, reminding me of how formative these experiences are in shaping self-perception and resilience. Her curiosity and intelligence are immediately apparent. Even in moments of comedic mishap, there is a keen awareness of her surroundings and a reflective capacity that hints at the growth she will undergo. The film emphasizes these traits through careful visual and narrative cues. Lingering shots on her expressive eyes, subtle gestures of hesitation or wonder, and dialogue that reveals both wit and sensitivity. These choices establish a foundation for the audience to connect with her not merely as a protagonist in a humorous scenario, but as a fully realized individual whose inner life is rich and nuanced. I found myself invested in her journey because she feels like a person I might have known in my own life, someone navigating the liminal space between childhood certainty and adult expectation. Her mother, by contrast, is initially presented with a veneer of composure and competence. She manages a professional and personal life with an enviable precision, orchestrating schedules, obligations, and relationships with apparent ease. Yet early glimpses beneath this surface reveal the subtle tensions that shape her existence. Fatigue, quiet frustration, and a sense of responsibility that sometimes feels overwhelming. What makes her compelling is the way the film balances authority with vulnerability. Moments as small as a sigh while reviewing a calendar or a fleeting glance of exasperation convey volumes about her lived experience. I was struck by how relatable this portrayal is. It reminded me of adults I have known who carry immense responsibility, yet rarely complain, and how their internal lives are often more complex than their outward demeanor suggests. The body swap narrative allows both characters to explore dimensions of each other's personalities that would otherwise remain hidden. For the daughter, inhabiting her mother's world is a study in patience, empathy, and ethical judgment. She is confronted with responsibilities and expectations that her adolescent self has never fully appreciated, and each misstep is instructive. Yet even in moments of failure or misunderstanding, her intelligence, adaptability, and emotional sensitivity shine through. I recall particularly enjoying a sequence in which she negotiates a complex workplace scenario. Her instinctive problem-solving, tempered by her inexperience, reveals both humor and profound insight into her emerging maturity. This character arc highlights the film's central theme. Perspective and experience are transformative. The mother, inhabiting her daughter's body, experiences an equally profound shift in perspective. She is forced to navigate social hierarchies, emotional volatility, and ethical dilemmas that define adolescence. Her adult perspective initially creates a sense of overanalysis and occasional misjudgment, but it also allows her to intervene with wisdom, empathy, and strategic thought. The contrast between her approach and that of her peers highlights the complexities of adolescent experience, revealing how much negotiation, observation, and emotional intelligence is required to navigate these formative years. Watching her navigate these challenges, I was reminded of the hidden labor involved in growing up. The subtle attentiveness, the ethical choices, and the resilience required to maintain relationships and personal integrity. Secondary characters are crafted with similar care, each serving as both narrative catalyst and mirror to the protagonist's development. Friends, colleagues, and extended family members are not merely decorative. They reflect facets of the protagonist's personalities and illuminate relational dynamics. One friend, whose humor and empathy mirror the daughter's own tendencies, serves as both confidant and guide, highlighting her insecurities while providing comic relief. A professional colleague of the mother embodies the expectations and pressures of adulthood, creating both tension and opportunities for growth when the daughter inhabits this role. These interactions emphasize the relational foundation of identity. Who we are is inseparable from how we relate to others, and the film navigates this terrain with nuance and care. The daughter's humor is a defining feature of her character. It is often situational, arising from missteps, misunderstandings, or the absurdity of daily life, but it is also deeply rooted in her perspective. Her jokes and witty observations reflect a keen awareness of the world, an ability to find levity even in challenging circumstances, and a growing understanding of the human condition. I found myself laughing at moments of sheer comic brilliance, while simultaneously appreciating the insight embedded within these humorous exchanges. Humor in this film is not a distraction. It is a lens through which character, theme, and relational dynamics are explored. The mother's humor is more subtle, often emerging in moments of irony or understated observation. Her wit is tempered by experience and awareness, providing a counterpoint to the daughter's exuberance. The interplay between these two styles of humor enriches the narrative, creating a rhythm that balances levity and reflection. I was particularly drawn to the moments when their humor intersects, often revealing shared traits, values, or ethical sensibilities that transcend age and experience. These intersections illuminate the characters' deep connection, even as they navigate the unfamiliar territories of each other's lives. Emotional depth is another critical component of characterization. Both protagonists experience moments of vulnerability, fear, and self-doubt that feel genuine and relatable. The daughter's initial panic at professional missteps, the mother's discomfort in adolescent social situations. These are not simply plot devices. They are windows into complex interior worlds. The film allows these moments to unfold without rushing to resolution, giving the audience time to empathize, reflect, and anticipate growth. I found these sequences particularly compelling because they capture the gradual, non-linear process of personal development, mirroring the way real-life growth unfolds. The evolution of empathy is central to both characters' arcs. By inhabiting each other's lives, they gain insight into struggles, pressures, and emotional realities previously unacknowledged. The daughter begins to recognize the ethical, relational, and professional complexities her mother navigates daily. The mother, in turn, understands the social pressures, emotional turbulence, and moral choices that define adolescence. These insights are not superficial. They transform decision-making, self-perception, and relational engagement. Watching this unfold, I was reminded of how perspective-taking in real life can similarly alter understanding and behavior, deepening compassion and connection. Conflict serves as a critical vehicle for character development. Misunderstandings, ethical dilemmas, and situational pressures challenge both protagonists, revealing strengths, weaknesses, and areas for growth. A scene in which the daughter mishandles a workplace confrontation illustrates not only her initial inexperience, but also her capacity for resilience and adaptation. Similarly, the mother's navigation of a peer conflict highlights both her strategic thinking and her need to relinquish control in unfamiliar circumstances. These sequences illuminate the characters' multifaceted personalities and the ways in which adversity catalyzes insight. I found myself reflecting on analogous situations in my own life, recognizing the universal truths embedded in these fictional challenges. The narrative also explores the tension between external expectation and internal desire. Both mother and daughter confront the pressures imposed by society, family, and peers, while simultaneously negotiating personal values, ethical frameworks, and emotional needs. The daughters struggle to balance professional responsibility with her emerging sense of morality, and the mother's negotiation between peer conformity and personal integrity are central to their arcs. These conflicts feel authentic and relatable, highlighting the film's capacity to explore complex human experience without oversimplification. Secondary traits add texture to the protagonist's characterization. The daughter exhibits creativity, curiosity, and moral imagination, while the mother demonstrates strategic thinking, patience, and ethical discernment. Both characters are flawed, yet their flaws are integral to their growth. Mistakes are instructive, misunderstandings are illuminating, and moments of vulnerability reveal hidden strengths. I was particularly impressed by how these traits are revealed organically, through interaction, dialogue, and circumstance, rather than through expository narration. The relationship between mother and daughter is perhaps the most richly developed aspect of characterization. Initially defined by distance, misunderstanding, and generational difference, their bond evolves through shared experience, mutual challenge, and perspective-taking. Humor, conflict, and empathy intertwine to create a dynamic, evolving relational tapestry. Watching this development, I found myself reflecting on the ways in which relationships in real life are similarly shaped by shared experiences, challenges, and the willingness to inhabit another's perspective. The film transforms a fantastical premise into a study of relational psychology and emotional intelligence. Symbolism also plays a role in character analysis. Mirrors, reflective surfaces, and objects imbued with personal significance serve as visual cues for introspection, self-recognition, and emotional growth. The daughter's reflection often signals emerging maturity, while the mother's engagement with adolescent spaces conveys adaptation and learning. These symbolic elements enrich character understanding, providing a nonverbal narrative layer that complements dialogue and action. I found these visual cues deeply satisfying, as they reward attentive observation and enhance empathy for the protagonist's journeys. Growth and transformation are evident by the latter part of the narrative. The daughter becomes more self-aware, ethically engaged, and emotionally resilient, while the mother gains flexibility, empathy, and a renewed appreciation for the complexities of adolescence. These arcs are neither simplistic nor instantaneous. They unfold gradually, with setbacks, humor, and reflection woven throughout. The film captures the nonlinear nature of personal development with remarkable sensitivity, allowing the audience to witness change in a manner that feels authentic and resonant. Supporting characters function as mirrors, foils, and catalysts for the protagonist's growth. Colleagues, friends, and extended family members challenge assumptions, provoke reflection, and highlight relational dynamics. Their interactions with the mother and daughter illuminate latent traits, ethical sensibilities, and adaptive strategies. I found these secondary arcs particularly enriching, as they deepen the complexity of characterization and underscore the interconnectedness of identity, perspective, and relational experience. The film's humor continues to enhance characterization. Comedic situations reveal traits, highlight misunderstandings, and underscore emotional truth. The daughter's awkward navigation of professional spaces exposes both vulnerability and ingenuity, while the mother's missteps in social dynamics illuminate strategic thinking and adaptability. Humor becomes a lens through which the audience perceives character, making emotional insight both accessible and memorable. I found these sequences delightful, as they balance levity with intellectual and emotional depth. Internal dialogue and subtle nonverbal cues provide additional layers to characterization. Facial expressions, gestures, and timing convey nuanced emotional states, ethical dilemmas, and relational awareness. The daughter's hesitations, glances, and sighs communicate both thoughtfulness and uncertainty, while the mother's posture, eye contact, and microexpressions reveal strategic reflection and emotional attunement. These details reward careful observation, adding richness to the characters and fostering deep audience engagement. Ultimately, the strength of the character development lies in the protagonist's evolution through lived experience. By inhabiting each other's lives, they gain insight, empathy, and adaptability that would be unattainable through observation alone. Their arcs illustrate fundamental truths about identity that perspective, experience, and relational engagement are central to understanding self and other. Watching their journey, I was reminded of the transformative power of empathy and how narratives like this allow us to reflect on our own growth and relationships. The story of how Freakier Friday 2025 came to life behind the camera is almost as fascinating as the film itself, a tapestry woven from creative improvisation, serendipitous accidents, and the occasionally inexplicable nature of cinematic magic. One of the first details that caught my attention was how the initial script had undergone an extraordinary number of revisions before filming even began. The concept of a body swap had been around in various forms for decades, but the writer's insistence on grounding it in emotional realism, humor, and adolescent perspective led to endless reworking. Early drafts included scenes so fantastical and surreal that even the most imaginative producers raised eyebrows. There were sequences involving literal thought bubbles above characters' heads, rapid costume changes mid-scene, and even moments where objects in the environment seemed to move autonomously, reflecting the inner thoughts of the protagonists. While these ideas were eventually pared down, the willingness of the team to explore such extremes speaks volumes about their ambition and commitment to blending humor, emotion, and narrative complexity. Perhaps the strangest and simultaneously most charming behind-the-scenes anecdote involves the casting of the lead roles. The daughter and mother were chosen not only for their acting prowess, but for their almost uncanny ability to mimic each other's gestures and expressions. During rehearsals, it was noted that the actors would sometimes unconsciously adopt one another's posture or vocal cadence, even without performing a swap scene. One day, during a lunch break, a director noticed that the daughter had picked up her mother's habitual way of holding a cup of coffee, complete with a slight tilt of the wrist and a small sigh upon lifting the mug. It was such a minor, nearly imperceptible detail, but the director immediately recognized it as the kind of authenticity that would make the eventual swap scenes both believable and emotionally resonant. I found this particularly fascinating because it highlights how subtle human behaviors, tiny gestures, shifts in tone, or habitual expressions can convey volumes about identity, and how actors' observation and mimicry contribute to the film's psychological realism. Another unusual occurrence during production involved a sequence set in a bustling shopping mall. Originally intended as a straightforward montage of comedic chaos, the scene took on a life of its own due to unforeseen circumstances. On the day of filming, a flash mob had spontaneously formed in the mall, performing a coordinated dance routine with no prior notice to the film crew. At first, this was considered a major disruption, but the director, ever inventive, decided to incorporate the flash mob into the sequence. The resulting scene is one of the film's most energetic and visually striking moments, blending planned choreography with spontaneous real-world events. I found myself marveling at the serendipity of filmmaking and how embracing unpredictability can transform potential setbacks into creative gold. Lighting, cinematography, and camera placement also contributed to some curious behind-the-scenes stories. Many of the film's interior scenes were shot using practical lighting, sources that appeared in frame, like desk lamps, kitchen fixtures, or windows, rather than traditional overhead studio lighting. This decision created a naturalistic aesthetic, but introduced unpredictable challenges. For instance, one scene involved the daughter spilling coffee on her mother's work documents under a sunlit window. The timing of the sunlight had to be precise, or the reflections would ruin continuity. Multiple takes were required, and during one particularly memorable attempt, a stray bird flew through the window frame mid-shot, startling both actors and crew. The directors, seeing the comedic potential, eventually integrated the bird into the final cut as a subtle visual gag. Moments like these exemplify the fluid, adaptive nature of production, where chance occurrences can enhance the narrative rather than detract from it. Sound design also led to some fascinating discoveries. The film's score includes subtle, almost subliminal motifs tied to each character's emotional state. For the daughter, playful, staccato elements recur in moments of nervousness or hesitation, while more grounded, harmonic textures accompany scenes in the mother's professional environment. What is particularly intriguing is that some of these motifs were discovered accidentally during post-production. Sound engineers reported that certain harmonic sequences, originally thought to be noise artifacts from recording equipment, were actually musically resonant in ways that perfectly mirrored the emotional beats of the scenes. The decision to preserve these accidental motifs became one of the film's signature auditory touches, subtly guiding audience empathy and enhancing the viewing experience. I found this intersection of chance and intentionality particularly compelling, demonstrating how creativity often emerges from unexpected places. A number of peculiar occurrences arose from wardrobe and costume design. The production team faced the challenge of ensuring that clothing reflected each character's personality, while also supporting the visual continuity required by the body swap premise. One particularly amusing anecdote involves a dress designed for the mother that, unbeknownst to the costume team, was slightly too stiff. During a rehearsal, the daughter attempted to move naturally in the dress and ended up toppling a small prop table in the office set. While this initially caused panic among crew members, the director realized that the awkward, slightly clumsy movements amplified the comedic realism of the swap. This led to deliberate adjustments in choreography to highlight bodily awkwardness, a detail that resonates with audiences despite, or perhaps because of, its spontaneous origins. The production also faced strange technical challenges with digital effects, especially in sequences where body swap transitions needed to be visually hinted without overtly relying on CGI. One method involved filming a character walking past reflective surfaces, mirrors, polished floors, and windows, while subtly shifting posture and expression to convey internal perspective change. On one occasion, a mirror pane fractured slightly during a take, creating an unexpected visual effect that inadvertently enhanced the sense of disorientation. Rather than discard the footage, the directors retained the shot, and it became a memorable sequence that underscores the uncanny nature of inhabiting another's life. I was struck by how accidents, rather than being discarded, became integral to the film's visual language. Even simple props became sources of curious stories. A coffee mug used repeatedly throughout the film was accidentally chipped mid-shoot. Rather than replacing it, the production team incorporated the chip as a subtle symbol of imperfection, mirroring the character's growing understanding of human flaws. Similarly, a journal belonging to the daughter's character, intended as a single-use prop, was accidentally filled with doodles by an intern during downtime. This whimsical addition was retained in the final edit, adding texture to the daughter's interior world and offering an authentic, playful detail for attentive viewers. These stories reveal the organic, sometimes chaotic, but ultimately creative nature of filmmaking. Casting of secondary characters also led to surprising outcomes. One actor, initially hired for a minor role as a co-worker, improvised a scene that involved a peculiar blend of physical comedy and philosophical reflection. The improvisation was so effective that the director expanded the role, integrating new dialogue and plot elements that influenced key moments later in the narrative. This reflects a broader pattern throughout production. The openness to collaboration and improvisation fostered a sense of creative fluidity that enriched both character development and narrative complexity. Watching how minor actors' contributions evolved into major narrative threads reminded me of the collaborative alchemy of filmmaking, where every participant can shape the story in unexpected ways. Location scouting revealed equally unusual stories. Many of the film's key sequences were shot in spaces not originally intended for filming. One critical scene in a crowded cafe was captured in a location chosen only hours before the shoot, after the originally scheduled cafe fell through. Remarkably, the impromptu location offered unique architectural elements, including an exposed brick wall, eclectic lighting, and an overhead balcony. These features enhanced spatial depth and provided additional opportunities for physical comedy. On set, actors and crew noted the almost serendipitous alignment of architectural quirks with narrative needs, reinforcing the sense that the film's environment itself became a silent collaborator in storytelling. Another memorable behind-the-scenes tale involves the choreography of a school hallway scene. The production team faced the challenge of managing dozens of extras, each moving unpredictably, while simultaneously maintaining focus on the protagonist navigating the swapped life. One particularly eccentric extra brought a small dog to set, which was not scheduled to appear in the scene. Initially, this caused logistical chaos, but the dog's playful interactions with the daughter's character were so charming that the scene was revised to incorporate it. The final sequence remains one of the most endearing, subtly highlighting relational warmth, spontaneity, and the blending of intentional and unplanned cinematic moments. The director's approach to rehearsal also contributed to unusual and insightful stories. Rather than relying solely on traditional script readings, actors engaged in exercises where they physically embodied each other's characters long before filming. These exercises often led to moments of revelation. In one session, the daughter instinctively copied her mother's habitual head tilt, something neither had consciously noticed before. This moment of mimicry informed both performance and blocking during shoot days. The collaborative, experimental approach to rehearsal fostered a sense of discovery, where the actors themselves were continuously uncovering new layers of character, expression, and relational nuance. Even the film's editing process carried strange and fascinating tales. Initially, editors struggled with sequences where simultaneous action unfolded in parallel spaces, the daughter managing professional obligations while the mother navigated social conflict. Early cuts felt chaotic, with pacing that threatened to undermine both humor and clarity. Through trial, error, and experimentation, editors devised a split-screen-inspired technique, subtly guiding viewers' attention between narrative threads without overwhelming them. Interestingly, some of the timing choices emerged from accidental alignment of musical cues and dialogue beats during rough cuts. These happy accidents became integral to the film's rhythm, demonstrating how post-production can transform challenges into innovative storytelling devices. One particularly quirky anecdote involves the film's score. The composer, experimenting with unconventional instruments, included a set of tuned wine glasses for certain whimsical sequences. During recording, one glass shattered unexpectedly. The resulting sound was hauntingly melodic, and rather than discard it, the composer integrated the fragment into a motif representing sudden realization or perspective shift. This idiosyncratic inclusion became a subtle auditory signature of transformation throughout the film. I found this fascinating because it highlights the interplay between serendipity, creativity, and narrative symbolism, showing how even accidents can acquire profound meaning. Costume continuity also produced unusual behind-the-scenes challenges. Because the daughter and mother inhabit each other's bodies, every garment had to be carefully calibrated to accommodate movement, posture, and physical idiosyncrasies. Minor discrepancies could disrupt audience suspension of disbelief. During one outdoor sequence, wind unexpectedly revealed a hidden pattern on the mother's coat lining, which happened to perfectly echo a motif in a later interior scene. The directors decided to emphasize the coat's lining as a recurring visual cue, subtly reinforcing thematic continuity and narrative cohesion. It is fascinating how unplanned visual coincidences can be incorporated to enhance storytelling. Finally, one of the strangest facts about production involves the props department's innovative solutions to recurring comedic challenges. For instance, numerous attempts were made to create a perfectly spilling coffee cup that would behave reliably across multiple takes. After repeated failures with standard materials, the team experimented with a series of unconventional liquids, some of which were edible, others designed to look like coffee but behave more predictably. The resulting concoction became the official on-set coffee, and its peculiar viscosity was credited with producing some of the most memorable physical comedy in the film. These kinds of inventive, behind-the-scenes solutions underscore the resourcefulness, creativity, and sometimes downright eccentricity involved in bringing cinematic visions to life. From the very moment the opening credits fade, one realizes that the film is not content with merely entertaining. It invites reflection, a deep consideration of human experience and relational dynamics. The first scene, seemingly ordinary in its depiction of a mother navigating her morning routine, is loaded with subtle cues that set the stage for a larger critical examination. Every gesture, every glance, every slight change in pacing is carefully calibrated to convey layers of meaning. Observing these moments, I was reminded that even the most mundane-seeming events in life carry weight and consequence, and the film exploits this insight to remarkable effect. The narrative begins with the mother juggling a cacophony of responsibilities: a professional meeting, breakfast preparation, and her own internal reflections on the daughter's development. From a critical perspective, this establishes the central tension of role conflict, the thematic underpinning that drives much of the film's exploration. What is striking here is how the filmmakers manage to communicate the burden of societal and familial expectations without resorting to overt exposition. The subtle interplay of lighting, camera movement, and actor expression transforms a simple morning routine into a profound commentary on the invisible labor embedded in caregiving and adulthood. I found myself analyzing the framing, noticing how close-up shots emphasize emotional strain, while wider shots situate her within the chaotic rhythm of domestic and professional life, underscoring the constant negotiation between selfhood and obligation. The daughter's introduction provides a counterpoint, her world marked by adolescence, humor, and relational negotiation. Critically, this juxtaposition sets up a dialogue between generational perspectives, allowing the audience to examine the contrasts between lived experience, cognitive maturity, and emotional resilience. Each misstep she makes, be it social faux pas, academic miscalculation, or familial misunderstanding, serves as a lens through which we scrutinize the formative pressures of adolescence. Here, the film operates not simply as comedy, but as social critique, reflecting on the complexity of growing up and the unseen ethical choices that define character. I found the layering of humor and reflection particularly effective, prompting me to consider my own adolescence in parallel, and how seemingly trivial events often carry profound implications for identity formation. The body swap itself, while fantastical, becomes a vehicle for critical exploration. Its execution is more than a plot device. It is a lens through which the film interrogates empathy, perspective, and self-awareness. From a cinematic standpoint, the swap scenes are masterfully choreographed to reflect both psychological and emotional transformation. For example, the daughter's initial attempts to navigate her mother's professional world highlight gaps in understanding, illustrating the cognitive and emotional labor inherent in adult life. Conversely, the mother's experiences in her daughter's social sphere illuminate the pressures, expectations, and relational subtleties of adolescence. Critically, these scenes challenge viewers to consider the fluidity of identity and the ethical responsibility that comes with inhabiting another's perspective. I was particularly drawn to sequences where miscommunication escalates into tension, as these moments underscore the fragility of understanding and the importance of intentional engagement in human relationships. A significant event that warrants detailed analysis involves the mother confronting a professional crisis while in her daughter's body. The critical perspective here lies in the juxtaposition of competence and vulnerability. She possesses knowledge, judgment, and experience, yet her physical presence and social positioning hinder her efficacy. This narrative choice invites reflection on the role of embodiment in social perception and power dynamics. Observing this, I was reminded of scholarly discussions around performativity and the social construction of authority. Knowledge alone is insufficient without the relational and physical cues that signal legitimacy. The film cleverly integrates this theoretical insight into its comedic narrative, rendering complex ideas accessible without sacrificing humor or emotional resonance. Parallel to this is a climactic social confrontation in the daughter's environment, where the daughter, inhabiting her mother's body, inadvertently navigates ethical and relational dilemmas with a blend of naivete and insight. This event is pivotal both narratively and thematically. Critically, it exposes the tension between instinct and knowledge, highlighting how moral intuition and social awareness interact to shape behavior. The sequence's impact is amplified by precise cinematography. Close-ups capture micro-expressions of guilt, surprise, and reflection, while medium shots situate characters in relational context, emphasizing the interplay of social hierarchies and personal agency. Experiencing this as a viewer, I felt an acute awareness of ethical ambiguity and how both action and inaction carry consequences that ripple beyond immediate perception. Another strikingly critical moment occurs when the protagonists face a moment of near failure, a literal and figurative stumble that threatens to unravel their respective arcs. The daughter drops an important professional document, while simultaneously, the mother misinterprets a peer's social cues, leading to conflict. From a critical standpoint, these parallel mishaps are emblematic of the narrative's central thesis. Understanding and competence are inseparable from context, perspective, and relational attunement. The film's ability to interweave comedic timing with philosophical insight is particularly noteworthy here, creating moments that entertain while prompting reflection on the interdependence of human perception and ethical responsibility. I found myself marveling at how humor is strategically deployed not to trivialize these challenges, but to underscore their relatability and emotional truth. Emotional resonance is further deepened in sequences where both protagonists reflect privately on their swapped experiences. These quiet moments, often underplayed, are loaded with insight. For instance, the daughter's contemplation of her mother's stress, captured through lingering shots and minimal dialogue, reveals emerging empathy and self-awareness. Similarly, the mother's internal acknowledgement of the pressures her daughter faces conveys humility and relational sensitivity. Critically, these moments operate as narrative fulcrums. They transform plot mechanics into moral and emotional inquiry. I found these sequences particularly powerful because they demonstrate the film's commitment to character-driven storytelling, where internal reflection is as consequential as external action. The film also employs humor as a mechanism for critical commentary. For example, a scene in which the daughter navigates a professional meeting while grappling with unfamiliar bodily constraints is comedic on the surface, yet it simultaneously critiques societal assumptions about competence, gendered behavior, and authority. The juxtaposition of absurdity and insight invites viewers to consider the structural and relational dynamics underlying everyday interaction. I was struck by how seamlessly these critiques are embedded within humor, illustrating the filmmaker's sophisticated understanding of narrative layering and audience engagement. Another event of note involves the integration of secondary characters as ethical mirrors. Friends, colleagues, and extended family members react not only to surface behavior, but to subtle shifts in demeanor, posture, and decision-making. These interactions are crucial for critical analysis because they underscore how identity is socially constructed and relationally mediated. For instance, the daughter's friend responds to her mother-inhabiting behavior with a mix of confusion and recognition, highlighting the tension between external perception and internal identity. Similarly, a colleague's interpretation of the daughter-inhabiting mother's professional judgment illuminates implicit biases and assumptions that govern relational dynamics. Observing these interactions, I was reminded of sociological theories regarding role, expectation, impression management, and relational authority, all elegantly dramatized within the comedic narrative. Symbolic elements embedded in key events further enrich critical interpretation. Mirrors, reflective surfaces, and visual motifs recur throughout the narrative, serving as metaphors for self-examination, perspective-taking, and identity negotiation. One particularly memorable sequence involves the daughter confronting her reflection in a mirror, realizing the implications of inhabiting her mother's life. The cinematography frames her in fragmented reflections, visually representing the multiplicity of identity and the tension between self-perception and social expectation. I found this symbolic layering compelling, as it transforms what could be a straightforward comedic moment into a meditation on self-awareness, empathy, and relational responsibility. Thematically, the film consistently explores intergenerational tension and mutual understanding. Key events, from minor mishaps to climactic resolutions, are designed to highlight the contrasts and complementarities between adolescent and adult perspectives. The narrative illustrates how empathy, patience, and reflection are cultivated through lived experience, and how relational insight often requires immersion rather than observation. Critically, this perspective challenges the audience to reflect on their own assumptions, relationships, and ethical frameworks. I found myself repeatedly drawing connections between the film's events and broader social and psychological theories, appreciating how comedy can serve as a conduit for serious intellectual inquiry. The culmination of the film's central events, the resolution of misunderstandings, the restoration of relational equilibrium, and the protagonist's emotional growth, demonstrates the careful calibration of narrative, thematic, and emotional elements. The final sequences are not merely celebratory or humorous. They represent the synthesis of experiential learning, ethical reflection, and relational attunement. The mother and daughter, having navigated extraordinary circumstances, emerge with nuanced understanding, empathy, and adaptive resilience. From a critical standpoint, this resolution emphasizes the film's investment in character-driven thematic exploration, demonstrating how plot events can illuminate moral, social, and psychological truths. I was particularly moved by the subtlety of this resolution, which avoids melodrama in favor of authenticity, allowing the audience to internalize the lessons of perspective, empathy, and relational complexity. The film's critical reception can also be traced to its deft handling of these events. Reviewers and audiences alike noted the interplay of humor, ethical inquiry, and emotional resonance. By embedding significant philosophical and psychological questions within a comedic, fantastical framework, the film engages viewers across multiple levels of cognition and emotion. I found this particularly impressive because it demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of narrative mechanics. The filmmakers create spaces where laughter, reflection, and ethical consideration coexist, producing a layered and enduring impact. Even minor events warrant critical attention. Small gestures, such as the daughter subtly adjusting her mother's work materials, or the mother offering a quiet word of encouragement to a peer, function as microcosms of relational insight and ethical engagement. These events, though easily overlooked, contribute to the film's cumulative impact, reinforcing themes of empathy, ethical awareness, and perspective-taking. I found myself marveling at how carefully each narrative beat is constructed to carry both surface-level humor and deeper thematic weight, reflecting a commitment to storytelling that is intellectually, emotionally, and aesthetically rigorous. In sum, Freakier Friday 2025 operates on multiple critical planes simultaneously. Its events, both major and minor, serve as lenses through which audiences can examine identity, relational dynamics, and ethical responsibility. Humor, symbolic visual language, and nuanced character development converge to create a film that entertains while inviting serious reflection. Experiencing these events, I found myself oscillating between laughter, recognition, and contemplation, appreciating the sophisticated balance of narrative, thematic, and emotional resonance. The film's ability to combine levity with critical insight underscores its significance, positioning it as both a comedic achievement and a vehicle for intellectual and ethical inquiry. When I first learned about the production of Freakier Friday 2025, I assumed it would follow the typical patterns of contemporary family comedies: a straightforward shoot, conventional scheduling, and standard studio routines. What I discovered instead was a labyrinth of creative problem-solving, serendipitous discoveries, and collaborative ingenuity that made the filmmaking process feel as dynamic and alive as the story on screen. The production's story begins long before cameras rolled, during the script development phase, where writers worked tirelessly to balance humor, emotional resonance, and fantastical elements. The original drafts were reportedly filled with surreal sequences, some so experimental that they would have stretched even the most flexible visual effects teams to their limits. Scenes included floating furniture, animated thought bubbles, and literal time loops to express internal conflict. While many of these ideas were pared down for narrative clarity, the experimental mindset set the tone for a production willing to take risks and embrace creativity at every stage. One of the most fascinating behind-the-scenes aspects was the casting process. The mother-daughter duo needed not only to perform convincingly in their respective roles, but also to embody each other's mannerisms, facial expressions, and idiosyncrasies convincingly during the body swap sequences. To achieve this, the casting team organized workshops in which the actors spent weeks observing each other's daily movements, speech patterns, and subtle gestures. The level of detail was astonishing. During one exercise, the daughter unconsciously adopted her mother's habitual pause before answering a question, a subtle gesture that later became a critical touchstone for a key scene. The director often joked that the two actors were already swapping personalities before the cameras even rolled, and this playful observation hints at the deep psychological insight guiding the production. The production schedule itself was a marvel of logistical planning, filled with improvisation and ingenuity. Shooting took place across multiple locations: homes, schools, offices, and public spaces, and the team faced constant challenges in securing permits, coordinating extras, and managing environmental variables. One memorable anecdote involved a scene shot in a bustling urban market. Initially, the plan was to film early in the morning when the streets were relatively empty, but due to unforeseen delays, the crew arrived during peak shopping hours. Rather than rescheduling, the director embraced the chaos, instructing camera operators to weave through the